Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker. I got to tell you, today's sounds like a doozy. Today's like
Okay.
just the headline itself makes it sound like we are really manipulative SOBs. That's what it makes it sound like.
That if we're going to try to coerce, cajole, force somebody to accept something that they actually totally think is misguided, that's the
Yeah,
problem you have?
yeah. I mean, the words that you just used aren't far off from the actual headline. Getting people comfortable with the decision that they think is wrong, right?
Yeah. And so you're, let me make sure I'm clear on this. You're opposed to dictatorial power for the purposes of efficiency?
Yes. I think another way, a word for that is coercion, which is a very effective way to get things done,
Yeah.
but usually only once.
Well, I don't think I'm comfortable talking about this. So I'm going to sit here in silence for the rest of the time.
Well, can you tell me something that will help you feel more comfortable?
Okay, we didn't role play this, but yeah, that would be silly. That is the title. Now, there is an element in the word wrong, right?
Yes.
There's a whole element of change in organizations, and we talk about this all the time at Admired Leadership, which is how do you kind of get change happening, and how do you get, there's always the resistors and the old guard, and they're slow to adapt. That's a little look, you have to deal with that all the time. That's a little bit different than getting somebody on board when they just flat out disagree. Like
Yes.
they're just like and wrong could be like, I think this is misguided. Wrong could also be like, I think this is immoral. Wrong could be like, I think we just sold our souls to the devil, right? I mean, there's all the gradations. So you were reading this, it sounds like, in the sort of the worst case scenario.
Yes, but
Okay.
I also have like my wife's voice in my head when she might be in a spot where she doesn't know which way, but she wants to stay open-minded about the decision that she has to make. And it always seems like if she hasn't already pre-decided which way, we end up just doing what you want to do, Mikey, right? And so the way that she interprets that is this notion that I'm good at talking and therefore good at manipulating things
Oh,
going the way
okay.
that I want them to go, right?
Got it.
So even if she was undecided, she was like, So in my mind, so I've had long discussions with her about what could weigh in consensus building and how you've got two roles in decision making, that are important inside of an organization.
Yeah.
But all those things are really fascinating because they really
Okay.
do show up in every arena where you might be working with people, whether
And
you're the
and
leader or not.
And this, by the way, this is the fun of Lead Better and the idea of saying, well, here's a daily field note. And you could have read that field note and maybe it stuck with you. Maybe you didn't remember it 10 minutes later, but at some level that you as a leader should be contending with this stuff. And I'm going to I'll set it up this way, which is I've been thinking a lot about what actually causes us to change. Like we have this behavioral model around leadership that's different than just like it's all psychology and you just got to treat this person this way and that way. And we think of it that way. And so part of that in olden days, right, was you were an apprentice to somebody. You watched them, you were there. And so you could see them wrestling in it. And a field note is one thing, but this is the point of actually unpacking this. And it's why I love these conversations, because as you said, these are not unessential. These are actually essential topics and things, even if you say, well, I don't plan on cajoling somebody into doing something that's against their morals. Okay, well, maybe that's not the case, but there's going to be a lot of times when you have to get somebody to enroll, subscribe, switch to a perspective, or at least be open. So how do you do that? And there's some really unique things in this field note about that. I don't think I would read it out of the gate as an admonition to the leader. Be prepared to use these tricks to get people to do things against their will.
Certainly not, right? But the nature of headlines is to read it as if it is a trick,
Okay.
unfortunately. So as long as everyone knows, that's not why we wrote it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, what it gets to is how do you get people comfortable with something that they might feel opposed to? And actually, the whole point is to create a dialogue. Like,
Yes.
well, what's the thing that would make you comfortable with this, right? Like, I might just be I may not have seen your perspective, And if we can kind of get into the same atmosphere, maybe it changes both of us to a degree, and maybe you take a step towards me.
Yes. Okay. So the question for me really becomes, when is it that you have this discussion? There's a second question for me, is like, who has this discussion as well? Because with consensus building, oftentimes when you're in the middle of making a decision and you're trying to build consensus, it's wise that the person who is ultimately going to make the decision is not the person who should be building consensus, right? The person who is building consensus should probably have less skin in the game, so that as they're going around whipping the vote and trying to build consensus, it does not feel as if
it's not clear where they lean at that point.
Right. So that person who, again, is different than the decision maker, the consensus builder, the person who's building that consensus, working consensus.
Now, does that person have to be neutral, or could they just have to hide their perspective during that process of the consensus discussions?
If you're a leader and you're trying to make that kind of determination as to who this role is, probably the most neutral person should be. So if you've got an organizational decision and the least affected department is the marketing department, maybe it is the VP of marketing who is the consensus builder, right? They don't have as much skin in the game, so no one's going to be suspect of the fact that they're trying to cajole in any way. But either way, it should be an open dialogue among everybody as to why it is that they were chosen. It shouldn't be a secret thing.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes the leader who's choosing who the consensus maker is, or who's kind of suggesting who the consensus maker is, ought to not be the decision maker themselves. They also should maybe be suggesting who the decision maker is. And how that exactly works, all of that is like another thing that's kind of behind our paywall, right? It's inside of the playbook as to exactly, but it's an important thing to kind of bring up here, right? Who is it that's actually saying the thing? What can I do to get you more comfortable with the decision? Right. And at what point should they best say that, right?
Yeah.
Because I know someone is not comfortable, but at what layer of consensus are you not comfortable? Are you at the layer of consensus that says, I'm going to stand in the way of it? Or are you at the layer of consensus that says, I can live with it, but it's not, I don't want this one to be the choice that it goes.
One thing I go ahead, finish.
So I think this is the person that we're talking to in this field note, is the person who's at that fifth layer of consensus. That person who's like, I can live with it, but I'm having a hard time sounding like I'm going to get behind the decision. Right. So getting that person to the point where the decision is going to be made, we all know which direction is going. How can I make you more comfortable with this? It's not the person who said, I'm going to stand in the way of it, because usually you're still discussing the decision at that point if you're doing it properly.
Okay. Now, I'd also like to talk to the person that's a little annoyed that we keep talking about content that's behind a paywall. Now, what can I get you to, what can I do to help you get comfortable? Well, I can point out that we do more free leadership content of profound nature every single darn day, right? Than any other leadership organization on the planet. And it's great stuff. That's why we love talking about it.
They should be asking us what would make us more comfortable talking about
Exactly right. Exactly. Now, I think you set up that idea of where people sometimes lean or land on those levels of consensus. But in this case, the field note is directed not necessarily to the person who's the neutral builder of consensus. It's actually comes to maybe that person, but it could be to the leader who actually has to deliver the bad news. And the unique insight in this field note is that part of that conversation, when you get to the point, what can I do to get you comfortable with this decision, which is kind of an open-ended question, that the leader is kind of taking responsibility for the fact that this is uncomfortable. Like the neutral person can't quite be that burden bearer, right? It really, because it's like, I'm the one making the call. Like I've decided, I've listened to all of these things. We're going to do this. I know you had an important division. This is not the way you advocated. So when I come in and I say, look, we all argue for things. Sometimes it goes in our direction, sometimes it doesn't. In this one, you're still an important voice here, and I can try to persuade you that way. Hey, your opinion really matters. We're going to try to take that into account. Instead, I'm taking a pause and I'm saying, look, I know I'm making a decision here that you're not going to be happy with. And that does keep me up. Like I'm thinking about this to a good extent. What can I do? Now that actually sets the stage for, it's not going to totally ameliorate or pacify that person's apprehensions about the decision, but it's a very strong relational directive that says, let's actually build a deeper connection around this because we disagree about it, and the relationship will be better. Maybe the decision gets sanded a little bit. I don't see that there's a downside to an approach like that.
No, I don't think so either. Provided it's in the context of like, this is a relationship. It's a deeper relationship now
Right.
because of that. So the phrasing, can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to add this to.
Are you asking me if I'm
here.
comfortable with the?
If you're comfortable, yes. So David points out here in the comment section, I tried something similar last week, but clumsily. Instead of asking, and so this is, he's pointing out, what can I do to make you more comfortable with this decision? Right. He says, what part of the changes I'm proposing are making you uncomfortable? So he says, my question wasn't as good as your question.
It's still a pretty good question, though, because he's actually, well, and it comes from a place where you would assume that David does, like, maybe he has an idea of what he thinks the reasons are, but he's not saying, well, you're probably irritated about this. And he's saying, look, what are the things that you're uncomfortable with here? Which is still a good question.
Yes. So I like to point out the similarities here, right? You're both kind of backing up into a place of curiosity, which is great. You're reorienting yourself away from conflict and into curiosity. You're both asking for more specificity in both questions. Both ask for more specificity without giving the impression of a leader being entrenched. So the leader's saying, I'm open to possible change of some sort. Now, it might not be changing
right.
That's
a very good point. Yeah.
So David's question might inadvertently suggest that the other person should treat their uncomfort as a non-negotiable. Right? So let's read it again. What part of the changes I'm proposing are making you uncomfortable?
Yeah, that does make it feel like I might change some part of this based on what you say.
Yes. And I don't want to entrench you into saying like, oh, now that my uncomfort level is the highest thing here.
Although when you say, what can I do to make you more comfortable? That implies that I'm going to listen to your objection and I might entertain it in some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the possibility is more of like, I'm not promising that I'm changing anything, but I am way open to the idea of listening to what you have to say.
Yeah. Right.
And that's why David praised the phraseology that we had of the question that we're suggesting. Yeah. Right. So,
well, one of the other things that's in this is that the field note kind of emphasizes that the value that's happening here with the leader is that the leader is kind of approaching this with an expression of a desire to help. Meaning, it's not like done deal, just deal with it, right? Which is probably in most organizations what happens.
Right. Yeah.
99 times out of 100.
Right.
Deal with it.
And again, it's not, I know there might be this notion of like consensus building wastes too much time, right? But if you want to have people's buy-in, because you making a decision by yourself doesn't matter at all if you don't have buy-in, right?
Right.
The people who are actually going to operate the decision, you making the best decision in the world, doesn't matter if you don't have buy-in.
Yeah. And you're gonna tamp down these real pockets of discord if you can kind of create this view. And I think that the thing that the field note underlines is, as you do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're offered to kind of take this step as a leader that you want to help, that they're going to take you up on it necessarily. But the fact that you offered to help is the thing that will be remembered. That's the relational aspect here.
I do wonder if that gets people into trouble. Like if your tone and inflection is such a degree where it really does feel like you're saying, I'll do whatever it takes to get you to just be on board with us.
I don't think the whatever it takes. You're not a car salesman here.
Right. But you could maybe imply that in just the tone that you used when you phrased this question. So it's important that you're deft with this, right? That you do it in the right kind of setting, in the right kind of way. So, All right.
Well, okay. So I'd love to be able to tease tomorrow's topic, but we don't have that yet.
Okay.
And even though it is Saturday, and some people would be like, wait, I wasn't aware that these Lead Better conversations have actually, they're not just a Monday through Friday thing. They are not. And in fact, if you happen to just kind of click into the Substack app or something, you wandered by one of the other social platforms where it was streaming, you can subscribe to these in your favorite podcast app and watch them later. Listen to them later. You can watch them later as well. So please do, but you can tell us and respond and comment, and hopefully the idea here is, like the comments that Mikey just highlighted, that should help us, and this should be a multi-directional conversation.
Yeah, I believe that it will make the conversation better. So yeah, please.
There you go.
All right. Thanks very much, Scott. Talk tomorrow.
Thanks, Mikey. Bye.